guys! Welcome to the very first episode of Bedtime Stories with May. I'm gonna tell you stories from my reading area here, as you can see. I absolutely love these bookshelves. It's just simply made out of two letters. And this quote here absolutely wholly dear to my heart. It says, God's timing is always perfect. He's orchestrating our every steps. Beautiful, right? Okay, so before I start, let me grab my nightcap here. Well, as you can see, I have a bottle of water. Okay, just one glass a night before bed. Alright, let's settle in. Alright, let me put this down. Okay, are you ready for your bedtime story? Okay, so the title of this story is called The Ones Who Walked Away from Omelas. Some of you may have read this before. It's a classic literature by Ursula LeGuin. So here goes. Long time ago, there's this magical place, a fantasy land called Omelas. And Omelas is such a beautiful place that the people there are always happy, they are guilt-free, they are in a carnival all the time. And people there are also living with a secret. The secret lies below Omelas. Below Omelas, there is a basement and there is a child that is locked in the basement. And the child is being tortured every day in the basement. I don't know if the child is a boy or girl. It doesn't say he or she. The story describes the child as an it. So the child is being tortured because that's the rule of the story. That's the game. That's the rule of the game, where in order for the many citizens of Omelas to be happy, the child needs to suffer. And eventually, the people of Omelas who were assigned to torture the child realized that they couldn't live with that sort of evil in them anymore, and eventually they walked away from Omelas. Hence the title of the story, The Ones Who Walked Away. The story ended there, but it left a lot for me to reflect. I reflected this with my Acumen family as part of the Acumen Fellowship. We discussed this in great length, and there seemed to be no one real option of what's right or wrong to do. So think about this. A, you and your family, let's say if you're citizens of Omelas, you and your family are enjoying your wonderful, beautiful, guilt-free, pain-free life above. It's magical, it's a carnival every day. But you know that a child is suffering, and that suffering is necessary to keep you and your family away from the suffering. So A, do you ignore it? Do you continue to live in that situation? Or B, would you walk away as well, knowing that you wouldn't want to live off the misery of the child? Or C, would you stay and rebel? Would you stay and try to free the child? Try to stop someone from hurting the child? But the rule is people would be suffering. More people would be suffering if you free the child. And well, there are many other options, you know. And what I think is, what if there's a concept of shared suffering? What if every person in Omelas take turns one day to be in the dungeon and to suffer? What if we can change that rule? Who made the rules? What if we can change the rule? Or I also thought, what if I walked out of Omelas and find help? What if there's some people, some other magical being outside of Omelas that could help? I don't know. And I also thought very deeply about, what if I speak to the child about it? What does the child want? Is it more comforting for the child to know that I am there every day to accompany the child? Or is it more comforting for the child to know that I walked out to look for solutions, but I will always come back? So I've reflected on this deeply a little bit, and I noticed that this Omelas is not just a fantasy land. It is the world we are living in today. The child is a metaphor for the vulnerable communities that is operating, I will say, maybe below our normal surface, and they are contributing to the country, to our community in some ways. You know, they do jobs that we don't want to do. The construction workers, the waiters, people who work in the markets, they are all the child. They are still of service to something, to keep the ecosystem working, to keep majority of the people happy. But they are very underappreciated, and in some ways, especially now, they are being tortured as well. So I'm reflecting, how different are we from Omelas? We talk about it as a bedtime story. It seems like a fun thought and just some musings before we go to bed. But the reality is that we are living in this world of Omelas. And what we do about the situation tells a lot about our character. And especially for those with children, the children are watching. How do we treat the many childs around? Do we call them and eat? Do we label a community of people and label them as the people? Or do we recognize them as individuals, as a child, a he or a she? And do we try to do something to comfort them in some ways? So I leave you with that thought, the story of Omelas. I leave you with that. There's no right or wrong answer to it, no judgment. It's a personal choice. But for me, if I ever have a choice to show what people of Omelas can do, I would choose the path that we talk to the child, we let the child have a choice, let the child have a voice. So there goes the end of the bedtime story. But before we end every segment, I would like to start this little tradition where we do something called like a gratitude exercise. So think about one single moment today that made you feel very grateful. You have it? And think about the people associated with that particular moment. It could be your family members, it could be someone virtual, it could be your pets. Yeah, think about that moment and just say thanks for having that particular moment in spite of whatever else you've gone through today. Yeah? And with that, my friends, I've successfully completed my first episode of Bedtime Stories with May. Alright, good night guys. Cheers!